The topic for this evening is a question. The question was sent to me this afternoon by a nice devotee friend in Detroit. Their group in Detroit was reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 21, Text 21. So those of you that like to follow along, you can 3:21:21. This section is a Kapila Dev section, and who's Kapila Dev? Kapila Dev is an incarnation of Vishnu. He's an avatar of Vishnu, and he appeared very early in the cycle of the first Swayambhuva Manu, the first Manu, son of Brahma. And he was the son, Kapila was the son of Brahma's son, his grandson. Brahma's had two sons. Brahma had, one of his sons was Swayambhuva Manu, first Manu, and Manu's daughter was Devahuti, and Devahuti was married to Karma Muni, and they had 9 daughters and 1 son. Kapila Dev was their son, so it's very early, the dawn of creation, things are just getting rolling. And Devahuti, starting in chapter 20, because it goes back a number of chapters, she is now without her husband. Her husband returned back to the forest after some discussion with Karma Muni about that return. Now let's see. This is, maybe I'm ahead of myself. Yeah, I'm ahead of myself. They didn't get married yet. What happened is Brahma requested his son, Karma Muni, to assist him in becoming a Prajapati, filling up the universe with good praja. So the answer was yes, but before doing that, he went to the forest to qualify himself to have good praja by the process for that age, process of spiritual elevation. In Satya Yuga is meditation, so he went to the forest for meditation. And he was not only a meditator, but he was a bhakta, a great devotee, and his meditation was upon Lord Vishnu. Long period of time, total absorption in Lord Vishnu, and much to his surprise, Lord Vishnu appeared. Nice description of his appearance, his 4 arms standing on the back of Garuda, the wings of Garuda flapping very gently, making a nice sound. And he's looking up in the sky, and there's Lord Vishnu, the one who he was meditating upon. And so he offers prayers. Now, the context is, he has agreed, without resistance, but he's agreed to assist his father in becoming a Prajapati, produce good offspring. So, at the same time, he's profound devotee, such that Lord Vishnu is going to tell him, your desire, I've come for 2 reasons. One is because you please me very much by your devotion. The second is, I want to inform you that I know your heart. Your heart's desire is not just to have a child, but to have me as your child. And the answer is, I will appear as your child. So, but in his appearance, so that's the context. Now, in his appearance, Karma Muni is amazed, offers his obeisances again and again. He is a learned person, so he offers very learned prayers, glorifying the personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu. So they're very nice prayers. And he in verse 21, he says, I continuously offer my respectful obeisances unto your lotus feet, of which it is worthy to take shelter, because you shower all benedictions on the insignificant, to give all living entities detachment from fruitive activity. By realizing you have expanded these material worlds by your own energy. So he's answering the question here, why creation? Because along with creation, there's good fortune and ill fortune. There's happiness and there's stress. There's birth, death, disease, and old age. There are things that happen to people they don't like. And then people start asking, why did God do this? Why do bad things happen? God can make things good. He made things so it's such a bad. One of those kind of questions, sometimes. The answer is we wanted it. We wanted not the misfortune, but we wanted illusion. We wanted to try to enjoy separately from the supreme enjoyer. Rather than he's the enjoyer, we wanted to be a competitor enjoyer, which isn't possible. And so an illusory place is created where it looked like happiness enough that one keeps chasing it. But it's not happiness, what real happiness is, and mixed in is distress, which isn't real distress either. Real distress is forgetfulness of our real happiness, of our relationship with the Supreme. It's the world of illusion, illusory appearances of things that aren't real. So in any spiritual practice, certainly in the devotional practice, but all spiritual practices, there's two things required: knowledge and detachment, jnana vairagya. The Upanishads, we discussed this yesterday, and we discussed it during my previous visit to Houston. Jnana and vairagya are essential. However, if one pursues jnana standing on its own, the vairagya is going to be very flimsy, because it doesn't stand alone. Jnana is not independent. It's dependent. And bhakti is independent, and from bhakti comes knowledge that's supported by bhakti, which is independent. So it's sustainable. And then the detachment also. I mean, I hope you can follow what I'm saying, because the topic, the devotee that raised this question, they're reading in Detroit, in their reading group, they're reading the Bhagavatam, they came across this verse, and I'm going to read the purport, and we'll see what the question is. So there's two paragraphs, and it's the second paragraph that was the question. Unless one is disgusted with the enjoyment of this material world, he cannot aspire for liberation. And he says it in reverse order. Liberation is for one who is disgusted with material enjoyment. Vedanta Sutra says, therefore, atato brahma jigyasa. Those who have given up the attempt to be happy in this material world can inquire about the absolute truth. For those who want to know the absolute truth, the Vedanta Sutra is available, as is Srimad Bhagavatam, the actual explanation of Vedanta Sutra. Since Bhagavad Gita is also Vedanta Sutra, by understanding Srimad Bhagavatam, Vedanta Sutra, or Bhagavad Gita, one can obtain real knowledge. When one obtains real knowledge, he becomes theoretically one with the Supreme. And when he actually begins the service of Brahman, or Krishna consciousness, he is not only liberated, but situated in his spiritual life. So the question was, there's a statement made by Srila Prabhupada it's in conjunction with Kapila's teachings, not teachings, his prayer. It's not Kapil either, it's Kardamuni. So Kardamuni's prayer to Vishnu is, by your grace, everything is created, and by your grace one can be detached from the spirit of being the enjoyer of everything created. Because, so let's say it again in a different way. The material world is created. Why creation? The material world is created because people want to enjoy separately from the Supreme. Because in relation to the spiritual world, there isn't separate enjoyment from the Supreme. There's only one object, and there's full focus upon the one object in love. Supposing somebody says, you know what, I want to enjoy. I want to be at the center. It's only fair. I mean, he can be the enjoyer sometimes, but I should be the enjoyer sometimes. It's only fair. Anyway, whatever the language is, the material world is created as a facility for people who wish to have separate enjoyment. And for those who don't have the desire for separate enjoyment, the spiritual world is available. The Supreme Lord is forever inviting the conditioned souls to come to him, as in Bhagavad Gita and all scriptures. He's inviting people to come to him. So the statement specifically is, in order to have that aspiration for liberation, there has to be an unwillingness. The word that's used is disgust, for that the lifestyle of trying to be an enjoyer where there isn't enjoyment. It's not pointing fingers, it's just indicating there's a way to live in the world that's very joyful. And that very joyful way to live in this world is to see all things as coming from their source of emanation, and then engage them in relation to the source of emanation. Like offering palmfuls of Ganges to the Ganges. The Ganges doesn't need palmfuls. The benefit goes to the person who's making the offering of the Ganges unto the Ganges. Similarly, the life of bhakti is, the world is created, let us recognize the origin of this world, and then engage things of this world in relation to the origin, in relation to the Supreme. It's right. The principle is simple and quite natural and very happy. So now back to the statement. We're going to go to another place in the Bhagavatam shortly. But the statement is, in order to have that aspiration, then there has to be the word that's used is disgust, or you can see through the glitter of the attraction of the lure of material arrangement, the lure of material enjoyment. Putting it bluntly, Prabhupada's way of saying it is, Maya is beckoning, come and enjoy me. Come and enjoy me. Come and enjoy me so I can kick you in the face. Now in Greek mythology there is such a person. And with all literatures there's such a person. She's beckoning, come and enjoy. It's the feature of Maya, or the aspect of Maya, the illusory energy enticing the hope of enjoyment. So to get to the place where one is eager, not only starting the path, but staying on the path of liberation, there has to be some dislike, dissatisfaction. Disdain is the word that's used here for material enjoyment. Then one can move. Okay, now the question that was asked was, there's a similar statement found in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's the story of Daksha. Who's Daksha? You know who's Daksha? You know? Huh?
Sati's dad.
Who's dad?
Sati?
Yeah. You know the rest of the story? Not sure. Huh?
His head got cut off.
Yes, Daksha got his head. He lost his head. He sure did. Okay. Okay, there's something that happened before that. Daksha had many sons. You know how many sons? How many sons? 10,000 sons. That's a lot of sons. And the sons were asked by their father, Daksha, to assist him in his Prajapati service, because Daksha was one of the sons that had that service, as Kardamoni had that service. So we're way over in the 6th canto, but the same service. You know, it's the business of filling up the universe that Brahma created. So he had many sons, and he sent them to a place, Narayana Saras, as a place where a sacred river flowed into the ocean, where it's known, where sages would go and perform austerities. And they went to do their austerities similarly to qualify themselves to assist their father in producing good praja. So while they were doing their austerities, who would show up but Narada Muni? And Narada Muni examined them, these Haryashvas. He gave them a riddle to see if they could solve the riddle. Without all the details, it was a very amazing riddle, and they understood, and they explained the riddle. They said, "You're very intelligent. That means you have the capacity to not become entangled in family life. You're eligible candidates for my Bhakti program. So please come with me." And they left their service for father to undergo austerities to qualify to have good offspring before, after getting married. And Narada went to inform Daksha, "Good news, your sons joined my Bhakti program, 10,000. He didn't say anything, but he was very angry. Some time passed, and he had another set of sons. This time, the smaller number was 1,000. And he gave them, said, "Go back. Your brothers got waylaid by Narada. Don't let the same thing happen to you. Beware of Narada. And go to Narayana Saras, the sacred place, and you do austerities. And when you're ready, you come back and you can assist me." He goes, "Yes, Father." And sure enough, Narada showed up. And he didn't have to even give him the riddle and test him. He just said, "Your brothers were most qualified. You should follow the path of your brothers. Come join my Bhakti ashram." And so they did. And Narada went back to inform Daksha of the good news. And this time he didn't bite his tongue. He criticized Narada severely. And in the criticism of Narada, this is Canto 6, Chapter 5, Text 41, 6.5.41. Daksha is speaking to Narada Muni. "Material enjoyment is indeed the cause of all unhappiness, but one cannot give it up unless one has personally experienced how much suffering it is. Therefore, one should be allowed to remain in so-called material enjoyment while simultaneously advancing in knowledge to experience the misery of this false material happiness, then, without help from others, one will find material enjoyment detestful. Those whose minds are changed by others do not become as renounced as those who have personal experience. So the question that was, raised in their discussion in Detroit, we often say, we're inclined to say, we hear it said that Daksha was speaking something that wasn't right. However, we find Prabhupada writing something in this Canto 3, Chapter 21, Text 21, purport that sounds like the same thing that Daksha said. That's not right. But this one's right. So how to reconcile? Is the question, anybody need clarification on the question? It has to do with renunciation. We'll take a couple steps back. In all spiritual practice, knowledge is important. Specifically, knowledge is important because it leads to detachment. Let's say, supposing one doesn't have knowledge. There's a name for that. It's the lack of knowledge is ignorance. And when there's ignorance, what happens is, when ignorance is imposed, tamagun is imposed upon living entity, then what happens is they do ignorant things. And ignorant things lead to suffering. So the antidote from Vedic perspective, and many, many spiritual perspectives, spiritual paths, some knowledge is needed because it's the antidote for ignorance. You turn light on and darkness is dispelled. Light is the antidote for darkness. Knowledge is the antidote for ignorance. And when there's sustainable knowledge, jnana, then there's detachment from the ignorant activities that bring suffering. So that's stepping way back. Now, detachment then, it's not, there's different ideas of what detachment is and how to do it. One idea of detachment discussed in Bhagavad Gita is karma sannyas. You know that one? Karma sannyas. Just give up activities. Some people think that's the solution. Just stop doing things. But how do you stop doing things? Because the soul is active. If it's possible, it's not possible. If it's possible to have no activity, then there's no karma. There's no bondage to karma because there's no activity, because karma is the reaction to activity. So stop activity. That's like the idea of meditation. You stop. No sense objects, no actions of the senses interacting with sense objects. You go into a contemplative state and stay there. How long can you stay there? After some time, because the soul is present, there will be activity. There will be activity in the mind, for sure. And that's one of the sixth sense. But so there's an idea to anesthetize the mind. You don't feel anything, you don't think anything, you become desireless. Anyway, we discussed this earlier, not here this evening, but desirelessness is the equivalent to putting the soul out of existence. And the soul is eternal. You can't put the soul out of existence. You can anesthetize. What's anesthesia? It's where consciousness, there's awake, there's sleep, and there's deep sleep. The deep sleep is like anesthesia. But when you put somebody under anesthesia, you can cut them up and do operations and so many things, but after some time, it's not that the soul went out of existence. Because when the anesthesia wears off, so desire, the soul is there, desire is there. It's just anesthetized. It's not burning or active or vibrant. It's just covered, deeply covered. But the soul doesn't go out of existence. So you can anesthetize the soul, that is desire. You can suppress desire, but it's not natural. After some time, the anesthesia wears off, or the effect of suppressing desire will wear off, and one desires friendship and love and activity, because that's the nature of the soul. So what to do? In Daksha's case, he has an argument, he has a grievance with Narada. Yes, material activity is the source of suffering, but you can't just give up material activity because there's desire. So what's needed is the regulation of living in the atmosphere of enjoyment, but regulating that enjoyment like family life, and regulating the enjoyment by the codes of the Vedas and abiding by the codes of the Vedas. Then gradually one will be moving towards the Supreme, because that's what that was his plan for his sons. Do this yajna, that yajna, the other yajna. He brags to Narada, I've done so many yajnas, the whole range of yajnas, and so many of each one of them. I'm up there with detachment, but he wasn't detached. He lost his anger. He cursed Narada. He made a big offense. And then later he made a big offense to Lord Shiva. So he wasn't beyond desire. He hadn't come to the stage of transcendence. So his argument is you have to go through the misfortune of suffering, and simultaneously the means of purification of the soul, to get to the point where you realize that's not a good program. Let me just, then within oneself, one doesn't need the help of anyone else. One will realize, I want liberation. I want to terminate the material existence. There's lots of assumptions in what he's saying. One of them I'll just mention. One idea of liberation is cessation of material existence. This is the Buddhist conception. Nirvana is the Buddhist conception. You familiar with that term? Nirvana? Behind you against the wall. Nirvana. Nirvana, it's a Sanskrit term, literally means, nir means not and vana means forest. You're out of the forest of material existence. Cessation of material existence, nirvana. Cessation of material existence. If you cease material existence, what's left? Depends on what your concept of what is the Supreme. If you're an impersonalist, it's the impersonal Brahman. If you're a Buddhist, it's nothingness. And if you're a Vaishnava, the definition in Srimad Bhagavatam is a different definition. It's Svarupena Vyavastati. Swarupa, in one's spiritual form, Vyavastati. One becomes situated in one's spiritual form. And in that spiritual form, you serve the Supreme Spirit, you serve Hari. That's the Bhagavatam definition of liberation. Some of you may know, in the Bhagavatam, there's two places where it lists the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam, and one of them is liberation. It's one of the 10 topics. And the definition in the Bhagavatam is not become nothing or void, That's the Buddhist definition of nirvana. Void. When you stop material existence, what happens? Nothing. Or if you're an impersonalist, what happens after you stop material existence? Impersonal Brahman. And if you're a Vaishnava, when you stop material existence, what happens? You serve the Supreme. So if you serve the Supreme, automatically, or a subset of serving the Supreme is knowledge and detachment. Concept is simple. Doing it is maybe, it just takes practice. But it also takes proper guidance and what the goal is and how to reach the goal, and then applying yourself to the goal. So back to the question. There's a statement made by Daksha that we often consider to be a wrong statement. And there's a statement made by Prabhupada in relation to his meeting of Kardama Muni's meeting of Lord Vishnu, that he's interested in liberation because he's detestful about material existence. So I was asked how to answer that seeming contradiction. One's right, the other's wrong, but they both sound the same. Clear? They're not the same statements. Let's go to the first one, where Kardama Muni, is going to be entering household life. He not only is agreeing to his father's request to help him produce good praja, and for that he'll also require a wife to produce good praja, and thus household life. So that's material. And you engage yourself in the material energy, and you're, notionally at least, you're implicated in the laws of nature and the bondage of material activities, etc., etc. But he's going ahead. So yet Karamuni he's profoundly interested in spirit, to the extent that the Supreme Spiritual Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, has come to him in the middle of a forest, showing his form, accepting his prayers, speaking to him very sweetly. So when one becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that's detachment from material enjoyment. Say it the other way. One cannot come to the stage of attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as long as there's this obstacle covering consciousness that says, I want to be an enjoyer of the temporary. So one has to let go, or at least gradually diminish that affectation that one has for being an enjoyer of the material energy. Knowledge and detachment are essential, and knowledge and detachment are a byproduct of bhakti, and Kardama had both. He had bhakti, and he had knowledge and detachment. So the statement that Prabhupada makes in that particular purport is, he says it forwards and backwards. The forwards is, in order to have attraction for the absolute truth, there must be a distastefulness or a disconnect with material enjoyment, the aspiration to become an enjoyer in the material world. Or to say it the other way, the determination to not become an enjoyer in the material world is a prerequisite for a sincere investigation in the absolute truth. Inquiry. Without it, there's no inquiry. With it, then there's inquiry, and then one can move along the path because of the inquiry into the absolute truth. So bhakti, the answer to this is, and hopefully the devotee, is he online? Okay. This is for the Detroit devotees. The detachment that's necessary for inquiry into the absolute truth, atato brahma jigyasa, this Vedanta Sutra, that's from that particular purport, arises from bhakti. You're not going to get anybody come to sit in the front. Nice try, but it's not going to happen. Been around for a while. People don't like the front row. Few people like the front row. You come sit up here. Look at that. Now look, you have a nice space for somebody else to... Where you vacated, they can sit back there. That's good. That's good. Now, the argument, let's go to the 6th canto, Daksha's argument to Narada. Yes, material activity is the source of all misery. Agreed, I'm not disagreeing with that. However, for detachment to come, you have to experience the misery. And then you can be detached from that which gives rise to the misery. So if you've been through it and you've suffered, then you can say, no, I don't want it. If you haven't been through it, how are you going to say, I don't want it? And then go to the liberation side. That's his argument. And when you're going through that, yes, live by theistic conduct, follow the Vedas, do the activities that persons are properly followers of Vedic teachings do. They follow their swadharma, they follow their prescribed duties, they do things in a way that you should do. And even with that, there's unpleasantries, and make it stronger. There's suffering. But once they've been through that, and been through the purification of regulated life under the codes of the Vedas, then you're closer, the light is on brighter to understand this is not the means of achieving happiness. When you've been through it, you can let go of it. If you haven't been through it, you can't let go of it. So you cheated my sons. That's his argument. But knowledge can arise directly from bhakti. Now what Narada did before he invited these sons of Daksha into his ashram was he examined them. Are they suited for household life, or are they suited for detached life? And if they're suited for household life, no problem. That what Daksha has asked you to do is just fine. But if you're suited for renounced life, as he concluded, these sons, they didn't require that which Daksha is recommending or saying is required. You have to go through the procedure of living in the world, following regulated life, doing your duties, and so forth and so on, and suffer a bit. And when you're on the other side, you're more elevated because you've followed your duties of following the Vedas, and you've had sufficient suffering to know it. That's not really what I want to do. Not really what the purpose of life is. And then you can choose differently. Come on in. Hare Krishna. Look at this. She's going to sit in the front row. He wants you to sit on the cloth. He won't leave you alone till you sit on the cloth. got to sit on the cloth. There you go. Okay. I'm helping you. I'm teasing you also. That's okay. From bhakti, knowledge and detachment arise. So Daksha's not right. Narada had the capacity to have the sons of Daksha receive knowledge and detachment because he first examined them and they were qualified for bhakti. And then he would nourish and give the resources to further that bhakti, and all their detachment could arise directly. So they're not in contradiction. It sounds like they're in contradiction, like one's, anyway. The dislike, the reservation, the word detestful is pretty strong, but the caution about implicating oneself in material activities is that should be there for any person, any prudent, mindful person. As I get my car, let me be careful as I drive on the highway. It can be used. Let's say someone's a devotee. I can use this in Krishna's service, but I have to be careful. And anything else. I can use the wealth that comes from being a householder and having a nice house and stuff. At the same time, there's risk, and so I should be very careful when I'm doing something that's risky. Another common example Prabhupada gives is shaving. Now, ladies don't know so much about this, but razors are sharp, and if you're not attentive, then now it's safety razors, but you're not attentive and you can cut yourself. Blood all over the place. So you have to be careful. Even with safety razors, you have to be careful. So it's useful, but when you use something useful, be careful. Fire, it's useful, but be careful. It can be very damaging. You can burn your house down, etc. So to utilize things, the point here is, to utilize things in service to Krishna has its risk. It has its advantage, and it also has its risk. Rupa Goswami teaches the same idea. This is now for the devotees in Detroit as well as in the room. Rupa Goswami teaches about this principle of renunciation or detachment, because that was the question. So, a palgu vairagya or false renunciation is things that are in relation to Hari Sambandha, you reject them. But it's not yours to reject. So don't reject them. Recognize whose they are. They're in relation to Hari, and you use them in relation to Hari. False renunciation is to reject things. Complete renunciation is to recognize the connection of all things with the source of emanation and engage with those things in relation to the source. That's Rupa Goswami. And that engaging things in relation to the source, that's bhakti. That's the detachment that comes from bhakti. Now supposing one is not a very advanced devotee. I know a few people that, they're nice, but they're not yet very advanced devotees. So now how do you apply that principle? Because there's a tendency, you put yourself in touch with something, and the tendency is to get attached to that something and try to become the enjoyer of that something. And frustrated when it doesn't bring the enjoyment, and very unhappy when it's lost or it breaks or someone steals it or something like that. You have to become very protective of your property, and maybe better not to have it, right? That's Daksha's idea. Because it brings misery, then you can be detached. have rather the recommendation of Rupa Goswami is not just rejecting it, and then you find happiness. Here we are. We're in the creation was made because we wanted to be enjoyers. Here it is, and here we are. Now, how to rectify the consciousness behind the creation? The rectification is to practice abhyasa, to practice the regulations of bhakti, not the regulations of progressive material advancement. I'll say the same thing in a different language, some Sanskrit terms. Pravritti and nivritti. Pravritti is the path of progressive enjoyment. Nivritti is the path of progressive detachment. Spiritual life is the path of progressive detachment, where you use things and over a course of time you don't, the affinity for the enjoyer, being the enjoyer of those things, slackens proportionate to one's bhakti. That is, I simply want to please Krishna. Let's take something that people like, and that's music. Around all over the world, that people like music. Music is universal language. Whatever your language is, every people like music. So, supposing somebody likes music, and they start to learn music, it happens. And then the tendency is to become the enjoyer of the music, even if it's devotional music. Learn to play harmonium, or learn to play mridanga, or learn to get together and have a nice time together, having nice music. It's nice. It's enjoyable. But it's not necessarily devotional, depending upon for whom is this being done. It takes a while to get it, because it starts with, it's fun. There's the social interaction, there's the developing a skill, the sound is very pleasing, etc. It's a nice experience. People like music. For whom is it being done? And what's the effect upon the person who is making the music? Let's say a vocalist or any musician. What's the effect on consciousness for them and for others? And to a degree is devotional. The impact is maximized for the person and for others who hear that music. And otherwise it implicates one further in the material energy. And take anything. I know some young people that are going down the path of an architectural career. Some others are going down the path of a medical career, etc., etc. So when one is going down the path of career development, one gets really busy with academics. And sometimes Krishna gets the back seat. Sometimes they forget to put Krishna in the back seat. Later. And the later doesn't happen because they're used to Krishna's not even in the back seat. It happens. But suppose there are others that Krishna's not only in the front seat, Krishna's in the driver's seat. And Krishna's, or he's right next to me telling me. So that person is feeling satisfaction, and that person is most successful in their career. They excel in their career better than the people that are really applying themselves in their academic work and their career pursuit. And the impact upon others is greater as well. So that knowledge and detachment arise from bhakti is the answer to the question of the devotees in Detroit. Detachment is necessary, detachment that arises from bhakti. Even in the very beginning, some inquisitiveness is needed. Otherwise, people will go somewhere else and do something else. In the next few days, start tomorrow evening, I'm going to Rice University. And then later I'm going to Denton, then after that I'm going to Texas A&M. And I'm going to be meeting with college kids. And this audience is different. That audience is very different than this audience. So one of the topics is going to be search for happiness, because everyone wants happiness. But then, what's happiness? And how do you know when you're happy? Because you may feel the nature of material happiness is it's very flickering. And it's not substantial also. It doesn't last long. It's asat. And it's not even what real happiness is. So one moved from this happiness to that happiness and the other happiness. Because it's not substantial. Search for happiness. Whoever's going to come, I don't know how many people will come to those programs, but whoever comes, there's some I want to know. And some inquisitiveness, otherwise they'd be off doing something else, somewhere else. And our responsibility as representatives of Bhagavad Gita or representatives of Krishna is present knowledge, present bhakti through some kirtan and prasadam and bhakti association, bhaktas. But then with that comes also knowledge and detachment. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. Wow, that was quick.
Yesterday we were talking about the qualities of a sadhu.
Qualities of a sadhu.
And we were also talking about the verse 1.2.7, which
Yes.
was very similar to 3 in the third canto also. So there was a discussion about knowledge and detachment,
Yes.
how it comes from bhakti. And today also you said detachment comes from knowledge.
Well, you're putting words in my mouth.
When knowledge leads to detachment.
There is a Vedic conception. It's particularly strong in the Upanishads that encourages cultivation of knowledge, the path of Gyan Yoga. Persons that study the Upanishads are particularly interested in cultivation of Gyan. And an objective in that cultivation of Gyan is detachment. It is the message that I said yesterday, and again I'm saying it, it's insufficient. What I said today is knowledge is dependent, whereas bhakti is independent.
That is clear. Maybe I'm not saying it right.
Try again.
Is it right that from bhakti comes knowledge and that knowledge leads to detachment?
Well, it's not cause and effect like that. Not quite like that. When bhakti rises, there you'll find both.
My question was that. Thank you. So they are concomitant.
Yes.
Because the verse.
Let's do this. You're being over analytical. There's a nice verse in the Bhagavatam, one of many, where the verse is comparing the eating process after one. So let's do it this way. After one, you've fasted sometimes, right? Maybe sometimes. More than sometimes. You're smiling like you do it a lot. You don't like fasting. Okay, it's Janmashtami. We're going to fast. It's Krishna Janmashtami. And as you're fasting for Janmashtami or some occasion, then what happens in the course of the day is you feel a little weakness in your body, and you may feel some hunger. And when you break the fast, there's a sequence. There's not like this, then this, then this, but energy is restored to the body. The sensation of hunger subsides, and at a certain point, if somebody said, "Would you like more of this or that or the other thing?" you say, "No, thank you. I'm satisfied." Similarly, in the bhakti process, there's a sequence, and one of them is detachment. So, bhakti parishanubhavo viraktir anyatra cha. Viraktir anyatra. You won't become detached from other things, because one is feeling very satisfied within. And therefore, a detachment from other things. And the other things become attractive when there's not satisfaction within. Para isha anubhav is the phrase. Para isha, the supreme controller. Anubhav, feelings of affection. And a desire to do some service. Those three arise from the process of hearing. Done nicely, the sound vibration coming from the right source. Bhakti arises. The desire to render service, feelings, and detachment.
Follow-up question. So, is knowledge necessary for detachment? When you say bhakti...
Oh, you're doing it again. Just do bhakti, please.
Right.
Let me ask you, when you read Bhagavad Gita, are you looking for Gyan or are you looking for bhakti?
Bhakti.
Well, most people are looking for Gyan. Just reality. I mean, honest answer is they want knowledge. And they don't like, they want to counteract ignorance by the effect of knowledge. But it's somewhat, as you or I or any one of us make a little spiritual progress, our focus is going to nourishing bhakti by that reading. Because it takes a while for bhakti, the seed, to grow. Well, as it grows, then that's what happens when you read.
Thank you.
And simultaneously, the concomitant factor is that knowledge is there. Okay?
I have a related question, Guru Maharaj. So how do we understand, in context to the knowledge that from bhakti comes knowledge and renunciation, but also we know that bahunam janmanam ante, so after many life, the knowledge person, people who are jnanis, who have knowledge,
I'm listening.
then they come to Krishna and surrender.
Not necessarily. They come to Krishna and surrender when they have association of a devotee. It's not spoken in the verse. It's unspoken. But they won't come to Krishna without association of devotees. It's not, you build a staircase to heaven and you're there. It's not like that. It's not more knowledge, more knowledge, more knowledge, more knowledge. The bell rings and you're with Krishna. That's not the process. They may not, but they come to the position of A, knowledge as opposed to ignorance, and B, association of devotee. Then they may surrender to Krishna by the path of knowledge. They may not also. A or B. Is that all right?
Yeah, and also you said it earlier that bhakti is independent.
Yes.
So generally, and there is, again, I'm trying to understand just the context. Yesham tva andgatam papam. So those who have some piety and their sinful activities has gone away, they
Yeah.
are fixed in devotional service. So when we say devotional service is independent, what does that mean? Meaning,
I was. Ahaitukiya pratyata. There's no hetu. There's nothing that can cause it. Knowledge doesn't cause bhakti. Detachment doesn't cause bhakti. There's nothing that can cause. There's no pious activities. There's no thing of this world that you can do that causes bhakti. It's independent, and there's nothing that can stop it once it's operating. There's nothing material that can stop it. You know, a classic example is Haridas Thakur's response to the magistrate, the king. So you can cut my body into little pieces, we're not going to stop chanting, which means the chanting is from the soul. The body is chopped up, but the soul is the place where real chanting comes from. It can't be stopped. That's independent. As Krishna is independent, Bhakti is independent. As independent as Krishna is. Is Vrindanath asking something online? Can we bring the microphone over here? Vrindanath is the devotee in Detroit who raised the question this afternoon.
Bhakti leads to knowledge and renunciation, but is it immediate or gradual to the extent of leading to distastefulness for material happiness?
Well, it's not that bhakti needs knowledge and detachment. Bhakti gives rise to knowledge and detachment. Is that how he begins his question? Bhakti needs. Bhakti doesn't need.
Bhakti leads.
Leads to. Oh. Let me see your phone. And then, because your reading is different than my ears. Bhakti leads to knowledge and renunciation, but is it immediate or gradual? It's gradual. Now, Krishna can do anything. So sometimes something can just manifest bhavati. But generally it's gradual. And so since it is gradual, doesn't it mean to continue living with regulations while practicing bhakti? Yes. We follow regulations, except, this is a detail, when one comes to the stage of love of God, or even before the stage of prema, in the stage of bhava bhakti, one follows regulations. Classic example of that is the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. Specifically, Raghunath Das and Sanatana Goswami has said both that their regulations were like lines in stone. They were the topmost stage of spiritual life, in bhakti life. But they followed the regulations very, very rigidly. Not because they needed to get somewhere. They did so because that was their life. However, the exception is, supposing there's a spontaneous mood of love that comes pouring out, and it may eclipse some regulation that they may do a certain time of the day or something, and that's not a flaw or fault. Otherwise, other than that spontaneous outburst of spiritual emotion or love of God, they'll follow regulations, such exalted persons. And that's the exception. It's an exception, not the rule. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So you said bhakti is independent, but still it requires, it needs to come from the bhakta. Basically, some bhakta needs to kind of have, you need to have bhakta's association, devotees association.
You get bhakti from a bhakta.
Yeah.
You get from bhakti from one who's carrying bhakti.
Right. That is still there.
And?
Basically, I mean, that is still there. You still need to have devotees association.
Are you saying that in order to receive bhakti, you need association of one who's carrying bhakti, therefore bhakti is not independent?
I'm not saying that, but yeah, I'm just kind of clarifying that. It is independent of detachment and knowledge, but...
Yeah. No. And anything else? Any other austerities or any other, high-grade activity, Prabhupada calls it? So, charity, philanthropy, it's independent. Next.
Next, Guru Maharaj is...
I'm sorry,
talked about
disrupted your train of thought.
That's okay. I had another one, but I forgot that.
Oh.
You talked about nirvana. The Buddhist follow the nirvana, which is nothingness. But, so, I mean, when the Gyan yogis follow the detachment from material world through the knowledge, but they still have the conception that there is a supreme which is all pervading, and that's the reason they go to the impersonal Brahman. But is there anything like nirvana or nothingness? Because
is there something like nirvana what?
Is it something like impersonal Brahma Jyoti is existing, that is reality. But nirvana is nirvana where nothing is there. Is that a reality somewhere where the Buddhists who follow that philosophy, they go there? Like
I don't follow what you're asking. Do you follow what he's asking?
Yeah, so what Prabhu is saying is just like the Mayavadis, they go to the Brahma effulgence.
Okay.
Where do the nirvana, those who are following Buddhism, nirvana, where is that place? Is there a place?
That's what you want to know?
yes, Guru Maharaj, because
That's your question. That's an easy question. You made it complicated. Okay. The answer that's given by Prabhupada's sannyas guru, Keshava Maharaj, he wrote substantially about Buddhism. It's the river Viraja. The river Viraja is neither here nor there. It's that which is between the material and the spiritual realm, the river Viraja. Now, for the most part, they don't get there because it's a very difficult and very severe process. But supposing they get there, very rare to get there. But if they get there, that's where they go. You have to go. Soul has to go somewhere.
so what happens after that? I mean,
They just hang out. After some time, the anesthesia wears off. And they take birth again. It's similar to the description found in the Bhagavatam. Aruya Krishchena Param Padam Tada Patantyano Yatnadmada Yushmadangraya. Because they're not sufficiently purified by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. They again have a desire for enjoyment. They haven't accomplished the spiritual enjoyment in its fullness, and they're just, they're anesthetized. It's artificial. And with the artificial holding in abeyance, desire for love and to be loved. and for activity, and so they come again. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
So earlier you'd used the regulation of Raghunath and Sanatana Goswamis as an example. So are we to understand that the only way to reach the level of bhava and prema is by strict regulation?
If I've understood your question correctly, you're repeating what Daksha had to say, and you're looking for verification. Is that what Daksha said?
No.
No.
No, the example you used a little bit earlier of Raghunath and Sanatana Goswamis.
Okay.
You were talking about
Raghunath Das Goswami and Sanatana Goswami,
Right.
and following regulations even though they didn't need it, but they did it because that was their life.
Yes, so are those regulations the only way we can get to the level of bhava and prema?
Well, it's this practicing sadhana is necessary to get to sadhya. The means to get to the goal is necessary. It's not just the behaviors, it's the awakening of bhakti, and those behaviors assist the awakening of bhakti. It's the submission unto the Supreme, and the expression of that submission unto the Supreme through the regulations, like cleanliness, truthfulness, and so forth. You could say it in reverse. Do I really have to be clean? Do I really have to be truthful in order to become spiritually elevated? Well, being clean and truthful are not sufficient to reach the Supreme. But if you want to reach the Supreme, do those things because it's enjoined in the Vedas that Krishna is pleased by these things. So we do those things because it's pleasing to Krishna. Minus the Krishna connection, they're not going to get you there. There's not just behaviors. You connect. You follow the point I'm making?
Yes.
Okay. Anything over on this side? I thought so. Here's the microphone.
Maharaj, I still have a doubt. Bhakta is needed for to awaken bhakti. Is that how? Like a bhakta is needed to awaken bhakti, right, Maharaj?
And let me say back what I think you're saying. For us to carry bhakti, we have to have received it from one who's carrying bhakti.
Yes.
Yes.
So how does it happen? It happens by either hearing from the bhakta.
Or anyway. Just they're carrying bhakti in their bhakti vessel and they spill some on you. Oh, pardon me.
So I was just
It could be,
remembering.
give them prasadam.
So I'm just thinking of the present situation where you are giving us knowledge, like you are teaching us or telling us about the scripture. So this knowledge also helps us awaken that bhakti, the dormant bhakti. Can I understand? Is one of the
Your question is, let me ask you a question similar to what I asked your husband. When you read Bhagavad Gita, or when you're sitting here hearing the class, are you interested in A, B, or a mix? Knowledge, bhakti, or a mix?
Bhakti knowledge.
You're interested in a mix, be honest.
No, my goal is bhakti.
Ah, that's different.
No, all the
That
examples.
wasn't my question, what your goal is. When you're reading Bhagavad Gita, we want to know. But when our bhakti is not matured yet, we want to know because we want to know. We're curious. And we want to know. That's fine. There's nothing shameful or embarrassing about it. Bhakti isn't matured yet. But as bhakti matures, then there's one thing, the object. Not information, but the object, the person and the loving relation with the person, the qualities, etc.
Thank you very much. That's
Behind you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I think, that's just my experience so far. Knowledge, like when I read Bhagavad Gita or I listen to any lectures, through knowledge, conviction comes, faith gets stronger.
Yes.
And because of that, and of course, all like devotee association
Fantastic.
devotee association. So then I think that okay, now I want to do more and more. But if I did not have the understanding, probably I would think that is just blindly I'm just doing because everybody is doing or because the scriptures recommend. That's what I feel. That's my experience.
Okay.
That only because I started. Otherwise, if I had not gotten understand whatever I'm understanding, I don't know. I would have just done probably regularly the puja that we used to do before getting the Krishna consciousness.
Yes. So you're doing very well. My compliments.
No much. That's.
Let me back up and clarify a distinction I'm making. There's knowledge in Bhagavad Gita. It's not that we read Bhagavad Gita. We're not supposed to be interested in knowledge. We want knowledge, but knowledge for what purpose? So in the beginning, my statement is, in the beginning, our bhakti is not matured, and so we're interested in knowledge for knowledge's sake. We feel a satisfaction, we feel more clean, we feel, ignorance is dispelled, and we're ready to go towards Krishna. But not necessarily, it's more in the liberationist idea than the please Krishna idea. Because that's our conditioning. However, as one's bhakti matures, because within Bhagavad Gita and within spiritual sound vibration in general, there's bhakti shakti. So one's getting bhakti shakti-ized, or getting spiritualized. Not just by knowledge, but by the bhakti that's the driving force that carries the knowledge into your heart and into your life. And that doesn't exist in renderings of Bhagavad Gita that are not devotional, because there's lots of those. And then it gets back to what you said. You just continue doing the Om Jaya Jagadish Hari program and the rituals and the reading, and that's it. It's the bhakti that carries one forward, and there's knowledge within it, built within it. Keep it simple, right?
Yes. Maharaj, I heard from somewhere, I don't remember, that Sukriti leads to association with devotees. Is that right?
It's Bhakti Sukriti. Bhakti Sukriti. Unknowing devotional activity builds to the point where one may knowingly take up some service. Agyata Sukriti is usually the way it's spoken. Unknowingly doing devotional service, or Bhakti Sukriti.
Thank you.
That's it?
That's
Whoa. Anything?
Swami, what is your viewpoint on Swami Vivekananda?
My viewpoint on Swami Vivekananda. Well, he he was a strong, Maya, keep it nice. He was a strong believer in a certain aspect of the absolute truth without giving illumination to the other two aspects of the absolute truth. And so in the Bhagavatam, there's an important verse. And that important verse, I could recite the Sanskrit, but what it says is, the absolute truth has three features. Each of those three features are in the Advaya, or non-dual realm. This is the dual, that's the non-dual realm, and there's three features. Brahman is one of those three features. Paramatma is another one of those features. And Bhagavan is the third of those features. And they're all in the Advaya realm. So with emphasis on Advaita Bhad, or Advaita Brahman, an emphasis there without acknowledging the other is incomplete. So that's not a problem unless there's defiling of the other. And then when there's defiling of the other, then that's a problem.
Okay, I see. So you feel...
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, you feel he was more one-sided?
Well, he gave emphasis to one thing.
Yeah.
And, he did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
He had a lot of people saying, yeah, there's one thing.
Great. So
Then there are other groups of spiritualists, the yogis, and their focus is on Paramatma feature. But Paramatma feature isn't the undifferentiated Brahman. The Paramatma feature is the localized form of Vishnu within the heart. And they see, they experience, and etc. So it's distinct. There's a oneness. At the same time, there's diversity within that oneness, but it's all of the Advaya realm, non-dual realm. And similarly, the Bhagavan feature is in the non-dual realm. And there are those that have very strong appreciation for the Bhagavan feature, so they're to be honored and respected as those who are meditating on the form of Paramatma within the heart, and those that have some attraction. As long as there isn't, the calling something a bad name, Paramatma and Bhagavan. And that happens sometimes. Okay, there's two. This is the last two, and then we're going to stop.
Thank you, Maharaj, for a wonderful class. Now, there was a reference to chapter 13 yesterday.
Say it slowly. There's reference to what?
Chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita.
Chapter 13, Bhagavad Gita.
Knowledge means qualities, right?
Yes, we spoke about that yesterday.
And of course, there was a discussion about Prahlad Maharaj responding to Hiranyakashipu and Amrish Maharaj responding to
Durvasa Muni, yes.
So we see some common, what you call, or is not common, deep compassion, the way they respond. So we know they're absorbed, completely absorbed in the Lord's service. So it's just a quality they inherit from the Lord?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's just two things. One is, it's not that the knowledge is qualities, but rather the symptom of one who has knowledge is qualities. There's characteristics of something. Like the characteristic of sugar is it's sweet. It's a characteristic of something. So the characteristic of one who is situated in knowledge is qualities. And there's some number of them. The second point is, the primary characteristic from which all other characteristics come is unalloyed devotion. It's right in that section of chapter 13. From the primary come the secondary. Your question.
Guru Maharaj, a devotee may be very strong in bhakti aspect, but may not have very much scholarly knowledge about the scriptures. So he's very strong in bhakti, but if someone asks him something, he may not be able to answer that question.
On the strength of scripture.
But since he knows the essence of knowledge, which is Krishna, pleasing Krishna, he will still be considered full of knowledge.
Well, you're making a statement. You're asking, do I agree, or what's it saying? He's not full
Well,
of
what I'm saying is, since he knows the essence of knowledge,
I know what you're saying. So does he have knowledge? Yes. Does he have complete knowledge? Not yet. Here's two things. When I get in the car, I'll send you a link to a recording that speaks on this point. And there's the Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama. The beginner, the intermediate, and the advanced. The Madhyama is the medium stage. Uttama. So all three, even the Kanishta, there's faith, preliminary faith, but soft and pliable. The Madhyama, they may not know all the details of the scripture, but they have implicit faith in the meanings of the scripture. And their faith is not shakable, but it's faith in the scripture. And the advanced, the Uttama, they have both. And in other words, they can draw upon this or that or another feature of scripture that addresses the question of the person that is unclear. And that's the Uttama person. But it's faith that's more matured and then more matured. So your statement is, one who knows the essence, they may not be in the Uttama stage where they know all the references, etc., but they know the essence. So they also have faith and in the essence of the scripture. And therefore we can say they're situated in knowledge. Yes.
Okay.
It's just the middle stage, not yet matured.
Thank you, Maharaj. The second question I have is Pravarti Marg and Nivarti Marg. Pravarti Marg, progressive enjoyment. When you reach the summit of that progressive enjoyment, you realize that you need to make a U-turn, left turn, right turn, or what happens?
Often it's just you continue on the Ferris wheel. So if one goes up to the higher planetary systems by proper following of the Pravriti Marg, they go there. And what do you do when you go there? You enjoy the opulences of heavenly kingdom, which means you're reducing the stockpile of your pious merit, and that's where the Ferris wheel goes back down again. That's the common, it doesn't have to be, but it's the common procedure. What happens when you follow Pravriti Marg properly? It just keeps the loop going.
Okay. Is there some sense of
it feeds into the question that was our topic, you weren't here at the beginning, but detachment, or the Prabhupada uses the word detestfulness, having a detestful attitude towards ritual enjoyment. That means the Pravriti Marg is over in the parking lot, and one is going on the Nivriti Marg. Okay, now go ahead.
Okay, so in that process of Pravarti Marg, is there a feeling or sense that this is not giving me happiness, this is not giving me enjoyment?
Ask Daksha.
Okay.
You missed the early part.
Yeah.
Did you catch the part? The Daksha's
No.
message to Narada when he's chastising him? You didn't give my son the Pravritti Marg path. And so they're not going to get to the point where they say, oh, I'm not happy.
Okay.
But there's no guarantee they're going to say, I'm not happy.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.